Yeah, no, I mean, dude, it has. I'm trying to think. Last time you and we met up. Was it February? No, it was after April-ish. I think at in DC.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're obviously like follower count wise on a meteoric like trajectory, and you always kind of wonder like, what's the ceiling going to be, you know? And the fact that you hit 2 million and it's November is like, it's outrageous. Frankly, it's
It's
outrageous.
preposterous. Like that's the word that I use. People are like, "Oh, how does it feel?" And I'm like, "It feels preposterous. It feels weird." And again, like I don't feel any different. It's
Hmm.
just like my whole life has changed from January to now. Like
Yep,
closing my business, not gigging anymore, working on my album, working on a book. And now this is my full time thing. And I'm considering: do I leave Tennessee? Do I stay in Tennessee? What's like, you know,
I
all
do.
in, all since January.
You and I have a uniquely shared understanding of being professional working musicians and then falling into content unexpectedly. Yours was a faster rise, but I had the same trajectory where I got to a point where I'm like, I just can't do both. Like I love music, but this work took over my passion. Right, where I
Yeah.
was like, I don't want to practice anymore. I don't want to be up till 2 o'clock in the morning gigging at that bar anymore. I want to do this. And it's just it's a very unique space to be in, because I think as musicians you never dream of a reality where you aren't like all in on the music side, right? And you're in Tennessee, Nashville, so you're really in it, and here you are.
And here I am. And it came music wise, it came down to with the guys, like pulling them aside and saying, "Hey, if you want me to gig once or twice a week, I can do that, or I can work on the album. Like you have to pick because I cannot do both." And it's also
Right.
been really interesting to write music from this space, um, because it's overlapping a lot with the things I'm talking about and the feelings that I have about the world around me, and even still, deconstruction is always a journey. The
Yep.
things I'm still processing from it, and so it's interesting to see this very new kind of music show up for me because I quit doing the other stuff and because it
Uh-huh.
overlaps with the work that I want to do. But for me, especially like with content and everything else, it's just like this just matters. It feels
I
like I
know.
can do something in the world, and that's what I want to be doing, especially in the current environment.
No, 100%. It is weird. What gets me is thinking about the fact of like how I grew up, how you grew up, and being like, oh my god, we know why this is all happening. We know why. Like I feel like folks like ourselves, April, many others are kind of uniquely positioned to be like, hey, pundits and media people, I know that you have great takes on the political side of this stuff for sure, but you're missing this like theology and this like long-term plan of Christian nationalism to
Yeah.
take over America that we grew up in and were taught by, you know?
It's like I know the verbiage. I've had a conversation with several Democratic leaders who are both in office and running for office, and obviously the questions around the Democratic Party have come up. And
Jesus.
one of my big complaints, besides being weak, performative, spineless little bitches, I don't know if I can curse on here. Sorry.
You can curse, that's
Um,
fine.
okay. But the other thing being is I was just like, you can't win this battle if you can't have a conversation in this language. Like if
100%.
you're not sitting down with a former Christian nationalist and understanding exactly what this movement is and the language that it speaks and what its goals are, then you are taking your fist to a gunfight, and what you're doing is going to be hugely ineffective, because they don't interact with it. I think people dismissed it for so long as
Yep.
it's the fringe movement. It won't do anything. Meanwhile, they've been working and strategizing for 100 years,
Yeah.
and they're not
Nice.
they're not stupid. And so
Exactly.
it's really about knowing the language. And I think people are waking up, but now I worry it's too late.
Well, I mean, I don't know how you feel, but I feel, I mean, at this point, you know, as an individual, of course, not as an organization, speaking for myself, I am so done with the Democratic Party. Like I'm over it. I am really all in on the Working Families Party. I love the work that they're doing. They're the people behind Mom Donnie. We interviewed Maurice Mitchell on the show before. Love what they're doing. Love what they stand for. Especially watching 8 Democrats essentially betray not only their party but like their own constituents and reopen the government. It
And
was
get
such a
nothing.
and get thank you and get nothing and watching Republicans say, "Well, we'll try the ACA subsidies if we can get stricter abortion laws passed." It's like, oh my god, like of course this was the freaking plan. It
Yeah.
is, after watching that happen, I was like, I'm just done. Like, because obviously they don't get it. They think that somehow you can compromise with like Christian fascists. And what I keep trying to tell people, and I know you do this too, is these people, and you and I are good faith people. We want to find compromise. We want to find common ground. These folks think that their opponents are demons, that they are demonic.
Like are actual enemies of God.
Yeah.
And therefore they are permitted to enact violence against you, like all of these things. And I have, especially coming from being extremely, far right to coming to be, I would label myself progressive.
Yeah.
I've never liked the Democratic Party because I recognize that there are many, many of them. That's not to say there aren't good leaders, because there are, but many of them are just GOP light. They're just more performative, because for the Democratic Party to not endorse Zoran, and as soon as we make that sweep on Tuesday, Nancy Pelosi announces her retirement because she knows the game's up.
Yeah.
She knows it's over. And 6 out of the 8 Democrats who sold us out are over 65. Yeah. They know they're on their way out. So they're going to take their last big payday, because I would bet my right arm that some corporate donors who really want people to spend money for the holidays started saying, hey, we need you to open things up so that people will spend money.
Yeah.
And so they're going to take their last big payday. They're going to ride off into the sunset and leave us to deal with the rest of the problems, which immediately, like the next day, Mike Johnson's like, we're not giving you a vote. Immediately the language came out about using funds to ban abortion, like to basically stop any government subsidy from any organization that offers abortion. So that includes like maternity wards, OBGYNs, no funding. If they offered abortion services, abortion happens for miscarriages, it happens for emergency, but any facility would have just been immediately defunded.
Right.
And I'm like, are you, and for me, it's very frustrating because I'm like, these people have showed you over and over and over and over and over who they are.
Yep.
Why do you not believe them? Why do you so my thought has to be, because I know that these Democrats are not stupid, is that they're buying in some way. There's some kind of value or gain for them, because I know that they're not stupid enough to not know what's going on, especially at this point. And so,
right.
But it gives me a lot of hope that between the sweep and just even people seeing the Democratic Party for what they are, it gives me a lot of hope that like we are seeing all these young progressives who are being really upfront about faith. We've got like James Tallarico and come with like, they have their policies. They're getting back to the meat and potatoes of affordability. And like, why are we getting distracted by these issues, demonizing people when we can work on making things affordable for everyone to live here? And I think that younger progressives are getting the idea. And we have Afton Bain's election here going on right now. Voting started today. So I'm really excited for that, because Tennessee needs some help. So there's optimism there, but it was just so disappointing, especially to get nothing in return. Literally nothing. 40 days of a shutdown for nothing. Nothing.
I just think a lot of us are at the point where we're like, look, you can't tell me with a straight face, as the billionaire class explodes in wealth, as the middle class is being erased, as people who are working full time can't even afford a roof over their head without going into crazy amounts of debt. You can't tell me that like we can't fix this. You can't tell me that we don't have a major problem. And when I see people talk about trans people or the immigrant, I'm like, you gotta be really wild to think that like the trans neighbor down the street is the problem in society when the billionaire class is robbing all of us blind. Like trickle down economics, we have almost 40 years now, 30 something years of that approach, and it hasn't worked for anyone except for the billionaires and the corporations. Like it just hasn't worked.
Billionaires and it's so funny because billionaires and corporations will demonize the word socialism, even though most people don't know the difference between socialism and communism.
Right.
But they'll demonize the word socialism, while the biggest participants in government socialism are billionaires and corporations, because they take our tax dollars, our funded subsidies, and instead of those taxes going into public services for us, they get to take them and do what they want with them and pay lower effective tax rates than we do. Elon Musk is the biggest welfare queen in this country.
Yep.
Like it's and the fact that he's on pace to be a trillionaire and people aren't seeing that this is a problem. We are the richest nation in human history. There's no excuse. There is no excuse we can't have a safety net of good education for everyone, healthcare for all. There's no reason. The only reason is greed. But it comes from not just trickle down economics, but there's also this idea of trickle down theology, where it's, well, God has chosen these wealthy, privileged, whoever to lead. And if you're poor, well, God's just punishing you for your sins. So you just need to be obedient. It's your fault.
Right.
And it like takes Christian nationalists off the hook to actually live Christ's work on earth, right? They get a pass. They're just storing up treasures in heaven. They don't have to help the poor. They don't have to give formula to a girl with a screaming child in the background. They don't have to do any of those things. Well, this is just God's just punishing you for being poor, so you should just pray harder. And it's this the trickle down, both theology and economics has never worked in the real world, and I wish it did, but it doesn't.
Right. So I mean, how are you? I mean, you and I talk offline pretty often. I'm always checking in, making sure you're not, losing it, because I know the feeling of just like always things to respond to, always content, always DMs to answer, always emails to get back to, always. And then you're thinking about what do I do today? How do I build this? It becomes a lot very quickly, and it can be kind of crippling because you can unintentionally feel like everything's on your shoulders to do, especially when you have a platform as large as yours. So I mean, how are you hanging in there? How are you managing it all? If you are, and what are you? Obviously you and I know what's wrong with the country. We've been doing this work either privately or now publicly for a lot of years now. But what are you looking forward to as far as like the better path? I'm always curious to hear from folks like yourself. Like, I agree Democrats aren't really it overall. So like, what are you looking towards to give you hope?
Well, one of the things that I've been doing as far as just like my own self-care is I've been setting really strict timelines for how long I stay reading about the news, how long I stay making content. I have like hours set that I can do that, and then I walk away kind of in the immediate. What the hope that I have is that I think the Christian nationalists and the GOP played their cards too fast. And so they pulled their hoods off so quick,
Yeah.
and they removed any transparency or any pretense that it's really painfully obvious now. And granted, there are still people choosing it, like seeing it for what it is, choosing it anyway. But there's a lot of people who aren't. And I think for people who are Christ followers and people who even maybe grew up in Christian fundamentalism, who really truly believed this is what God wants, this, I'm honoring Christ, I'm living like, they're starting to see, oh shit, people were telling me the truth. Like, this is not what I stand for. This is what I used to argue with people wasn't real. I get messages a lot from people saying, I always thought, the Democrats or people that were on the left were lying, and I see it now. And I think that the GOP making that mistake of ripping their hoods off so fast puts us in a good position to change the dynamic. And I'd like to see, obviously, get away from the two-party system, but
Oh
that's
my God, I would love that. Yeah,
I would love to see ranked choice voting.
I would love that. I would love
Voting
that.
parties. But I don't know how, from a political environment standpoint, you make that transition, especially because our entire system has been built on this two-party.
Yeah, I mean,
idea.
that's kind of the problems. I even thinking about even the whole billionaire problem. Like they own more than half the stock market, right?
Yeah.
So like if they
own 67% of the economy.
say that one more time.
The top 10% in the country owns 67% of the economy.
Right. So like the whole system is built on like this house of cards where if you pull them out, things are going to collapse at some point. Like there's no easy way to do it. And so I really feel this like catch-22 of like, we have to do something, but whatever we do is there's going to be a rip off the Band-Aid kind of feel in the beginning, but at some point it has to give, right? Like it does seem, especially with our two-party system, the only thing Democrats and Republicans agree on is the two-party freaking system. And because it benefits both of them, and it doesn't benefit Americans. Like I sound like a freaking Republican when I say that, but it's really true. It doesn't benefit the working class. It doesn't benefit the average person just trying to freaking survive. I'm really hoping, and I don't know if this is true, I could be altruistic here. I'm really hoping there's enough wind in the sails for someone like the Working Families Party to really be able to get some real traction and really change the game a little bit, because I love what they're doing so much, but I know that they're still a small fish in a big pond.
Yep, and it's tough to break a system that has that much of an establishment. And I will say this about, like, especially conservative Christians, is that their anger is right. They're just angry at the wrong people. Like, yes, people are scamming the system, stealing your jobs and your money. It's not your poor neighbor.
Right.
Not
right.
Like, so the vibe is correct.
Right.
The emotion is correct, but it's not being directed to the right people. And I think one of the things, and I don't know how you tap into that, but if you could tap into that anger and say, hey, listen, you're right. But it's that top and bottom issue, not the left and right issue. But again, for both Democrats and Republicans, it serves them to have us polarized right and left so that we don't pay attention to the rich and the major corporations who are picking our pockets. And how I don't even understand how we got to the point where corporations can operate as an individual and buy into elections.
I know.
Crazy. Crazy. I hate it.
No, same. How do you find the balance, if there is one, of honestly, I'm just so angry. Like, I found myself just more and more just like, raging against the machine, so to speak. But also I want to have a posture for people who want to change their mind that is welcoming. At the same time, I'm like, what were you thinking voting for this man? We tried to warn you. So I kind of go back and forth between this, like, I told you so, like, oh my God, like, what the hell were you thinking? But also I know that doesn't really change minds long term, right? Like, that's not how I changed my mind. It wasn't by being told I told you so. It was people holding space. How do you think about that with your content and with like your overall work?
I think obviously there's, like most things, there's a balance to it, and I've been dealing with a lot of anger. That's actually something that's come up for me just in my own practice of like, okay, I have some like rage that I need to deal with, like that I as an individual need to deal with. I come from a very, very abusive background. And so it tends to inflame that response in me, especially when I'm dealing with bullies or I'm dealing with people who are intentionally causing harm. So I'm like, okay, I need to address some of that. I think there is benefit to hulking out a little bit because it's authentic, it's honest, it gives people a space for their anger because anger is a good emotion. Anger gets demonized a lot, especially for women in like Christian fundamentalism. You're not allowed to get angry. You're not allowed to push back. You're not allowed to speak up. But anger is just a signal that your boundaries crossed. Anger is a symbol that like something's wrong and I need to correct what's wrong. Rage, on the other hand, is festering and it's harmful. So I think that there's a space for anger, and I'm always going to showcase some of that on my page because it's honest and authentic. And when it comes to things like even the Epstein email that was released today, I was just like, this is a flipping tables moment. So how do I balance flipping tables and driving people out of the temple with a whip with also reminding myself, and I do this every day because I sometimes want to slap people and I can't do that. So what I do is I remind myself that I was once this deeply indoctrinated. Right. As a smart person, as a person who thought I was doing everything right, as a person who didn't understand what covert racism was, much less that I was participating in it. And so I have to constantly revisit, Monte, like you used to be part of this and really sincerely, truly believed that you were doing the right thing. And granted, this was before Trump. I've really struggled with people's acceptance of Trump in Christian fundamentalism because even to me, even though I was very early in my deconstruction when he showed up on the scene, it was so clear to me that I'm like, this is not a good person. Right. I just have to keep reminding myself that I used to follow the rhetoric. I had a lot of fear about, if I had deconstructed while my dad was still alive, he absolutely would have disowned me. He absolutely would have had nothing to do with me. I did lose my church. I lost my community. I lost my friends. And I understand that the core of this is belonging. People want to have somewhere to belong to, something that they feel that gives their life meaning and gives their life purpose. And for many people that are in fundamentalist communities, if they choose to push back on these issues or walk away, they lose their entire community. They lose everything that they think makes them who they are. They lose their sense of love. And they feel, and they've been told that these people won't welcome you. These people hate you. These people are out to get you. And so it's a balance of creating the education and experiencing the anger while also understanding people can wake up anytime. And one of my favorite messages I got on Patreon was this woman flying into the comments. She's like, listen, I'm 40. The scales are off. I can't believe I bought this bullshit for so long. Where do I start? How do I help? And it was just, but you could feel that like it snapped, and you can't give that to someone. They have to find it themselves. But I do think that despite how many people are bought in, especially men in power who are pledging allegiance to power right now, that there are a lot of people who are saying, ooh, I didn't sign up for this. Like, wait a minute, this doesn't, and so I think it's a balance, and I think it has to be something that's just done like intentionally and with integrity, because I don't think that there's a benefit to not demonstrating the anger either. But it has to be that balance. And for me, it comes down to, yes, I'm going to demonstrate anger when I need to, but I'm going to prioritize education and information. Yeah. And then I'm also going to let people know and remind people, hey, I changed. You can also change. And that's kind of how I've been at least balancing that intellectually.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, I call it holy anger or holy rage. We need some of that, right? I mean, Jesus flipped tables, and that's important to be able to know when to pull that trigger and say this is like an injustice. And I think people are wired differently. I find myself way more in that quote unquote prophetic type where I'm just like, this is bullshit. Like, it's all terrible. And I even before I quote unquote deconstructed, I thought that about the American church. Like I was very anti megachurch. I was very anti consumerism. So I always kind of had like this like streak about me of just like, hey, the system is corrupt. We have to reform it or fix it. I just didn't realize long term how much of that was really my own tradition, that basement, so to speak, that I always mention. So what I mean, for you, I'm kind of curious because what were some of the big cracks in the dam? Obviously Trump was probably the biggest that really opened up the floodgates. What were some other things that you were kind of thinking about when you were in that conservative fundamentalism that started making you think a little bit differently about what you believed and why you believed it?
So I used to say that my deconstruction started at 23, but I can look back now and see that it actually started a little before that. There were some cracks that started really when I was 9. When I was 9 was when I became very aware of the treatment of women in the church, especially in the fundamentalist tradition. And I watched these double standards around the abuse of women, neglect of women play out. Of course, I heard all of the wives submit to your husbands sermons, but never heard how husbands ought to respect and love their wives. And I caught it, I recognized the hypocrisy then. But when you grow up in that system and they tell you, oh, well, you're broken, you're sinful, that's your defiance against God. And I also grew up in the system where, well, you're a woman, your job is to be quiet, don't ask questions, don't question God. Your only purpose is to get married and have kids. So I grew up, so you grow up in this conflict of, I recognize that this isn't right. And I remember at 9 coming home from one of those sermons, and I went downstairs to change my church dress, and I took my Bible and I chucked it across the room. And I said, fine, I'm not getting married then. Because in my little brain, I was like, well, I'm not going to disobey God. But if that's the prescription, I'm just not going to participate.
Right.
I'm not going to do it. But you push it down. You tell yourself, oh, that's my pride. That's my ego getting in the way. So you push it down. And you also, for me as a young woman, told myself, oh, it'll change when I get older. My feelings will change when I get older. They still haven't changed. And that would pop up a couple times periodically throughout my growing up years. Are you editing this post-edit?
I can.
Okay. I'm just going to put my cats in the room because Salem is deciding that he needs to put on a show, and I'm just going to put him in my bedroom really quick. Sorry.
No, I did hear him purr, and I'm like, wow, you got a cat who's going to town over there.
He's most of the time doesn't make a peep. Every once in a while, he decides he doesn't like that I'm on video and that he wants attention, and then he just starts getting obnoxiously loud. He doesn't need to do. Anyway, so I'll just flip him away. Back to what I was saying. But the big moment for me, there was 2 big moments that happened pretty close to each other. One was I went to Liberty University, so I took my required theology courses. I didn't major in theology, but they were required. I had been independently studying theology for 15 years under my dad, from the time I could read.
Right.
And so loved it. I loved it. So I was like, oh, I'm so excited I get to take these courses. And I had the opportunity to take them in Israel. So I went to Israel, and it was an incredible experience. And obviously at the time, I'm in this Christian fundamentalist kind of whirlwind. Hang on. I'm so sorry. Let me start that over. Sorry.
Well, I'm glad that you did.
Anyway, so, but the 2 big cracks that really changed my trajectory was I took in Liberty University, I was required to take a certain amount of theology classes, and I was able to take those in Israel. And of course, being a Christian nationalist at the time, carried all the Zionism with me. Oh my goodness, this is the most amazing thing, that's going to happen. And I remember being in Jerusalem, and we were visiting the Dome of the Rock, and we visited the Wailing Wall. We visited, where Golgotha is. And there's also a cistern you can visit that's believed to be where Jesus was held before he was crucified. But I'm at the Dome of the Rock, and I had never interacted with Muslim people. I had never seen a burqa. I'd never seen, any of this. And so I'm watching these people come and be in awe, right? Because it's such a holy place for them. And I'm watching some of them cry and pray. And I'm watching this really beautiful interaction happen around me, juxtaposed behind, there had just been a previous Gaza incident. So Israeli soldiers were all over the place with fully automatic weapons. And I'm watching this interaction take place, and I'm seeing the same kind of response at the Wailing Wall. People crying and weeping, and you could see the people who had never been there before and how much it meant to them. And people are rocking and they're chanting. And then, of course, I'm with a fully Christian group, and we're feeling those emotions for the same reason. But you would walk through Jerusalem, and you could just feel that I'm like, man, if anything goes wrong, this place can pop off at any time. And I remember sitting there thinking, why is it like this? Like, isn't faith supposed to make us better? Isn't faith, like, I'm watching the exact same language, responses, reverence from all these groups of people. Why is there so much hatred and violence tied to this? Why
Right.
is it like this? How did we get here? And that was the first time that I really branched off from like theological study to scholarly study. And the difference, for those who don't know the difference, theology is really studying the scripture under a predetermined religious umbrella. So you're kind of reinforcing your own faith, reinforcing what you already believe. Scholarship is just looking at all of the evidence and all of the literature and all of the history and saying, what is the best estimation I can get of the truth by looking at all the information, regardless of if I like that truth or not. I really started examining church history and tracing like, oh, there's a lot of problems here, and how really Christianity became an imperial religion for power under Constantine, and then became like maintained that both through the Roman Catholic Church, later through Protestant churches under kings and monarchies, just became a tool for power. And it really started to change the way I perceived faith, because I was like, oh, it's not faith that's making us like this. It's the fact that religion is being used as a weapon of oppression. Really started to change my perspective. But what changed my mind really on American soil, as far as my entire belief structure, especially related to politics, was I was engaged in my early 20s, and my then fiance, his half sister, got pregnant, and she was 12.
I'm
And
sorry, how old?
12.
Okay.
Yeah, same reaction I had. But we
Wow.
find out that she had been being molested by her mom's boyfriend since she was 9 years old.
Oh my God.
And so we're, and I mean, it was like cops are involved. I mean, charges are being pressed. Like, it is this thing. It is an event. And I'm there really just as support. I'm not family, but I'm sitting there kind of like thinking, like, Mom, this is like so awful. And as at the time, I was a no exceptions, quote, pro-lifer. I refer to pro-birthers now, but that was my belief system.
Yeah,
And
same.
especially one night, his mom called me and said, I can't get back from work in time. Will you take her to this? It was like a birth class for like pregnant teens, like as they were making their decision. Cause the family was like, the decision's totally up to you, but will you take her to this class? Cause stuff's still going on legally. It was a mess.
Wow.
So I drive her to this class. It's all these young girls. There was one 19-year-old. Most of them were 15, 16. And then she was 12. And out of all of the girls, only one girl, her boyfriend was with her, who was in the same grade. He was her age. All of the other girls, the baby's father was over 21. And none of them were there.
Oh my God.
I'm sitting in the back of the room. The men that are responsible for this are my age. None of them are here. And I realized the flaw in my thinking of, why have I never heard any church call for accountability of the men who are causing these pregnancies? And I already had felt the discrimination and the unfair treatment of women in the church, because I don't believe in a just God who would make half the human race to just be slaves.
Right.
You don't get any autonomy. You don't get a voice. You don't get to teach. You don't get to lead. That's not a good God. That's not somebody I would want to serve. So I had already seen that in real time. And so I'm like, where is the accountability for that? And that night, I've been an insomniac since I was 16, especially when I'm bothered by something. So it was the first time I thought to just do my own research, because when you grow up in this environment, and I went to all Christian nationalist schools, my dad's telling me the same thing that my teachers are telling me, that my pastor is telling me, that my friends' parents are telling
Yeah.
me, and women, it is the same story. It never occurs to you growing up that all of them are lying to you. Never. Like, it just doesn't cross your mind.
Right.
So I started researching about abortion. I didn't know anything about it at that time, and I was 23. I thought that the majority of abortions were in the second and third trimester, and I thought that after birth abortions were real. I was
That's right.
fully that was a real thing. And the first statistic I find is that 93% of abortions happen before 14 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I was flabbergasted. Like, I remember sitting up in bed, shocked. And I went and I verified it with all these different sources because
Mm-hmm.
at first, that can't be right. That can't be true. And I was really, the more I found out, the angrier I got. The angrier I got. And abortion was really the turning point for me because I recognized that one, all the facts, quotation marks, that I had been told growing up were lies. Two, there was no call for male accountability. And three, this was a child who did not make this choice. And I realized how unjust and evil my viewpoint was sitting next to her because this was not her fault. She didn't do anything. And it was a life threatening situation for her. And so for me to say, nope, you can't because my religion says so, that was the nail in the coffin because it was that situation and that research that led me to the point, wait a minute, the only reason I'm making this claim, the only reason I'm taking this stance is because of my religion. So if I'm legislating my religion, I'm therefore violating the religious liberties of others. And I oppose that because I believe in freedom, like, right? American exceptionalism. We are the most, all these things. I'm like, I actually do believe in that, just like I actually do believe in the red words. And then over the next couple years, I realized that a lot of people I grew up with don't actually believe in religious freedom. They don't actually believe in the Constitution, and they don't actually like the red words. And, enter Donald Trump. And I was a couple years into deconstruction when Trump enters the scene. And as I see him come into the screen, I'm like, ew. Like, I found it offensive that he was using the name of God or Jesus. Like, I found that personally affronting. And then I watched everyone I grew up with, all these people who demonized Bill Clinton because of Monica Lewinsky. We have to have leaders of moral character. And I'm watching all these people that demonized, adultery and, greed and and they're all, no questions asked, 2 feet on board. I was shocked. And so for me, it just made me realize, I'm like, okay, so you guys don't actually believe this. You don't actually believe all these things you taught me. You don't. And then even now we see a large percentage of kind of the Christian nationalist movement talk about that Jesus is too woke. And I'm like, okay, you don't actually believe any of this. So the benefit of that was that it set me free to really be curious, to be like, I am going to dig up all of the evidence I can get my hands on. And I'm just going to find what the truth is, because clearly you guys lied to me and you don't even believe this. And the other thing that helped me, and this sounds terrible to say it helped me, but my dad passed away in 2016. It was just this year of chaos. Like, Trump was on the scene. I was very worried about that because I saw Christian nationalists getting their chance. I knew what they wanted to do because I'd been raised in it. But my uncle died in June. My dad passed away 2 weeks later. And then a month later, my grandmother and my close friend died on the same day. Like, I was in the hospital room of my friend when I got the call about my grandmother. So I'm in this space, and I was raised by my dad. My dad was a single parent. I had a stepmom, but she wasn't really involved. But because my dad passed away, my dad was this driving force of Christian nationalism in my life. And also there was always the threat of, if you disagree with me on this, I'm going to disown you. I'm going to throw you out. I moved out when I was 15 in part because of that, because I was tired of the threat always being there.
Yeah.
So because he passed away, it removed that pressure from my life, right? That fear of loss, that fear of kind of this retribution if you dare to believe differently. So it gave me a chance. Granted, I had to go through the grieving process, which took me a long time to get to the place where I could even come back to these conversations and the searching that I was doing. But once I did, it gave me a lot more freedom. Again, that fear of losing community is such a chokehold for people.
Yeah.
You combine that with the doctrine of hell, and you've got a lot of scared people who are really afraid to do the wrong thing. And so that really, in a way, set me free to be like, I'm just going to find the truth, whatever it is, and everything else be damned, because the person I was actually afraid of losing, I've already lost.
Yeah.
And then that was really the kind of the beginning of the journey. And it's been a decade now of just diving into this work and all the information I could get my hands on, and talking to people and studying history, and completely changing my worldview, which is extremely destabilizing and scary when you're in it. But I'm super, super thankful for it. But I think it really started for me with how the church treats women.
Yeah, no, it's really good, and I mean, so many points so many similar points, of how same thing with abortion, how I changed my mind on that just based on my own experience, and then data, and the Trump thing was like, guys, like, wait, you want me to stay sexually pure before marriage with the guy grabbing women? Like, you want me to vote for? I don't understand, and then of course that was only the beginning of Trump, obviously.
Like,
Yeah, it was, it's interesting. So the abortion story for me is when we got pregnant with our first, we went to the doctor for like they do like a full like in-depth kind of like, okay, let's check on everything, let's measure everything. It's like an hour-long appointment, and everything was fine. And they go, okay, we're gonna do this test. I forgot the name of the test, but they essentially are testing for some abnormality, and depending on how the test comes back, they tell you that the fetus has either a 0 chance of survival or like a 50% chance, or it's everything's fine. If they're not diagnosed with it. And I was like, okay. And they go, yeah. And if this test comes back positive, then you'd have to make a decision. And I was like, what do you mean? Oh, okay. And that was when I realized, like, and thank God everything was super healthy, and Tim is here today. But if that test came back and showed that like something was terribly wrong, where the fetus would not survive outside the womb, I would want me and my partner and my healthcare provider to make that gut-wrenching decision, not the state mandating that my wife carry that fetus to term only to have it die.
Of losing her. Yeah.
Exactly. And that was kind of the first wake-up call of like, maybe this is more complicated than it's a modern-day Holocaust. People just want to kill their children, It's like, because that was, I marched for life in the March for Life rallies, Like, I'm well aware of what I believed and said and the views I held. But that moment was like, wait, right, this is not about like you're mandated to abort your fetus. It's about having the choice if things go terribly wrong or if you didn't intend to get pregnant, etc. And then the other thing that really got me was I thought to myself, I'm very pragmatic like you, Monty, where I'm just like, okay, so let me get this straight. If you think that abortion is a modern day Holocaust, that we are murdering children by the tens of thousands every month, wouldn't you want to do whatever you could to stop that from happening, even if you weren't a huge fan of the approach, like condoms and free birth control and like livable wages? Like, wouldn't you want to do whatever you could do to stop the modern day Holocaust from happening? And the answer is no. Apparently they don't. Apparently they don't want free birth control. They don't want condoms to be used, right? They don't want anything like that to happen. And also, it's a modern day Holocaust. And that's when it hit me. I'm like, I just don't think that you really believe this. Because if you did, wouldn't you want, again, whatever you could do to stop anyone from getting pregnant to save a life?
Yep.
No.
That was the other statistic when I was first like really researching everything, was that, I did a bunch of research on, because in my mind, I was like, well, I don't want there to be more abortions. So how do we, like, is there a way that we've seen that we can prevent it? And the top two things, comprehensive sex education and access to contraceptives. Right. So then I was like, well, wait a minute. Why are all these conservative groups trying to ban contraception? Right. Why don't they have that covered? And then I was so embarrassing, but I was, on the team, if you will, of like, everybody was like, insurance shouldn't cover birth control so women can go have sex. Blah, 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 blah. While insurance covers Viagra, you know what I mean?
Right, of course.
I was diagnosed with PCOS. With polycystic ovarian syndrome, like many, many reproductive problems with women, the only treatment is birth control. The only thing you can do to mitigate some of the symptoms, because for me, it was part of an anatomy issue plus the condition. And so I had to be on birth control, and it changed my life. Instead of being in debilitating pain every month when I couldn't walk, I haven't had a problem. And so I was, wait a minute, wait. You're telling me that insurance shouldn't cover this because you're worried a woman might have consensual sex?
Right.
And then as you go down the rabbit hole, you're like, wait a minute. If we're really pro-life, why aren't we advocating for free school lunches? Why aren't we talking about overhauling the adoption care system so it's not just human trafficking? I was like, why are we not talking, again, like paternal responsibility? Why are we not making sure that like the people have a livable wage, or make sure there's tons of resources for single parents? And we oppose every single one of these measures. That tells me that you don't actually believe this, that this has to be about control. Like, it has to be. It has to be.
Right. You don't want affordable health care. You don't want livable wages. You don't want paid family leave. And this is like a pro-family position. This is a pro-life position. Like and I'm sure like you, Monty, it wasn't like one day I was like, you know what? I want to be a raging liberal. Like that was never the approach.
Like,
right.
You don't understand.
Right. Like
you know how long it took me to get here.
I listened to Rush Limbaugh every day. Trust me, that was like my greatest fear, right? It was always about being faithful to Jesus and also loving my neighbor. Like even like the pandemic, right? Like I call it the unholy trinity of what radicalized me, right? It's Trump, it's Black Lives Matter, and it's COVID. Those three huge societal situations like shifted how I saw everything. And it wasn't because I wanted to like lose my community or lose my church or because I wanted to become an atheist. It was because I thought, wait a second, if Jesus says love your neighbor as yourself, it feels like common sense to wear a mask during a pandemic for which we have no vaccine yet or no really known way to mitigate the spread. And even if masking wasn't as effective as we hoped, the point still remains it was a minor inconvenience to try and save a life. But for some people, like Sean Foyt, that was tyranny. And I'm a worship drummer now, right? I'm in the church. I'm drumming in my church. I am in that space. I am, at this point, maybe moderate. I'm like rethinking things, but I'm not there all the way. And I'm like, guys, it seems very common sense that loving one's neighbor would mean let's wear a mask, let's social distance. We just don't know how this stuff operates yet. Like, and for some people, it was like, that's tyranny. I didn't get it.
Doing it in case it helps.
Right.
Like I don't know. I don't actually know if this really helps, but on the off chance that my elderly neighbor doesn't get sick, I'm going to try it. You know, it was just, I mean, and I was kind of out by the time COVID hit, like pretty much across the board. I wasn't as vocal yet because I was making sure I knew my shit. I'm a big data person. I was like, I want to make sure that if I'm having conversations around these topics that I know what I'm talking about. But that was just, it was another strike for me against, you know, kind of modern American Christian fundamentalism, where I was like, you guys are so full of shit. And now we see ICE running around. I'm like, oh, well, clearly masks weren't the problem. You know, masks don't inconvenience you. You know what I mean? Like, it was just, I've seen, you know, and then as you start to wake up, you see more and more that you're just like, this is a scam. Like, these people don't believe this. They don't actually care. You know, because also, as I recall reading the scripture with my two Bibles right next to me, is that like loving my neighbor didn't mean that they had to be white, didn't mean that they had to be Christian, it didn't mean that they had to be wealthy. And I start to see people come out, you know, because again, when you're young and they're training you to be in the system, they say all the right things, right?
Yep. Like,
we're doing this to honor God. And they'll say, women, we tell you that you have to submit and do all this because Jesus elevated women. And then they turn around and do the exact opposite. But they train you up to be this soldier for Christ, to be in this regimented system, and they tell you all the right things. And then in practice, they don't do any of it. Like, I look back at like old, you know, churches that I grew up in, and I'm like, I don't ever remember them actually going into the neighborhood and helping like poor non-Christians. I don't remember them ever actually trying to lift people up in the community if it didn't seem to serve them in some way. I don't remember, my churches didn't have baby banks. They didn't have food banks. We didn't do food drives. And I went to churches all over the country and was in church my whole life, and no church except for maybe a Christmas toy drive. And I started to realize, I'm like, you don't stand for any of this. Mm-hmm. Because again, even like we can use the issue of abortion, is that like, if you really cared about these kids so much, you'd still care when they got here, not stop caring after they're born. And then start to demonize parents who need food for their kids, right? I mean, and we just saw that with SNAP, like a bunch of Christians online laughing, mocking people who can't buy food, demonizing them. Well, you shouldn't have had kids then. And I'm like you're forcing people to have kids they can't afford. And then you're mad that they have kids they can't afford. So frustrating. It's so frustrating.
I remember when Roe v. Wade was overturned, and I saw people online, these pro-lifers, now's our chance to show that we care about babies after birth. We have to get some of these things passed. It hasn't happened. It hasn't happened. It's only gotten worse. I mean, it's only we fought a few weeks ago to reopen the government or close it based on SNAP benefits not going out and based on letting Affordable Care Act subsidies expire from COVID era that would see premiums go up by up to, in some cases, 500% for some people. Like, that's where we are in America under a Christian nationalist regime. Like, Mike Johnson is the leader of the House. He's the Speaker of the House. The man is as Christian nationalist as you can get. And what's the fruit? This is the fruit. Like, it is, I don't know how else to tell people. Like, and maybe that's, I mean, I want your thoughts on this, but that's what I think. If I was to go mad and end up in, like, you know, a psych ward, it would be over that. Like, I keep saying the same thing every damn day. Like, do you not see what these people are doing? And people are like, no, I don't get it. Well, trans people, man. Well, the immigrant. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me?
So yeah, and like it's like, again, it's being played out, and for me, I'm at a point now with things where I'm like, we are now at a point where things are so blatant and there's no nuance and there's no discretion that if this doesn't make you change your mind, I'm sorry. Like, I don't have anything for you, and you can clutch your pearls about me having a nose ring or cursing or being mad. You're actively on the side of an administration that has chosen to starve people to get its way, to the point where Trump threatened states that were like, hey, we have a savings, we have an emergency fund, we're going to fill these SNAP benefits. And Trump threatened those states. Like, you are actively participating. Like, nothing says pro-life like starving children.
Oh,
and
God.
It is just insane. And then again, people mocking others going hungry, the administration reaching out to penalize states that were trying to fill the gap and make sure people could eat. And then even with healthcare, we're going to give $40 billion to Argentina. That would be more than enough to cover these subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. And with the Affordable Care Act, my insurance, because I've always been a private buyer because I've owned my own business or worked as a worker, mine's going to go up 250%.
Jesus.
Yeah. Like, and I'm a young, healthy woman with no kids. I don't know how families. The point is that families won't be able to afford it. And the more they can cut funding, the more they can privatize and profit off it and just let the poor die because they don't care. It's so blatant right now that I'm like, for people who claim to be from a religion that one of the number one commands is to feed the poor, visit the sick, welcome the foreigner, you guys are really not reading your own manual. Like, it's the exact opposite. And it's so evil and cruel for no reason. No reason.
We have the money.
And every day it gets progressively worse. And I've gotten to a place where I'm just like, if these things, because even I will say there are very conservative people that I've known my whole life who are like walking away, just like, nope. That's too far. And that's why I say right now that if people can't see it now, if this doesn't make you uncomfortable, even something like seeing a TikTok of someone mocking hungry people doesn't bother you. Like, you don't get to have a moral conversation with me about like a moral high ground. You want to claim that gay people are the problem? Well, a pedophile in the White House, just miss me with that. Like, no.
I think this is why, going back to our conversation earlier, why I'm just so angry. Because I'm just like, it's not, guys, there is not a good faith conversation happening. Like, one side is saying we have to eradicate transgender people. One side is giving Nazi salutes out, celebrating the president of the United States during his inauguration, right? One side is gutting USAID, which we now have data really killed thousands of people overseas because that money and that funding never got to where it needed to go, right? And I'm just like, this is not a good faith conversation. And I think what people often miss that you and I know very well is that for Christian nationalists, this is all intentional. If they can gut social safety systems, if they can gut the Department of Education, which has been in the crosshairs for decades, this is all part of how they rebuild the government in their image. And I know for some people out there, this sounds conspiratorial. I know to someone who did not grow up in this world, it sounds almost like Alex Jones level outlandish, right? Like, wait, you can't be serious that they would intentionally be trying to dismantle the government to rebuild it in their theocratic image. And what I'm saying, what Monte is saying is, no, that's exactly what they're doing. And if you haven't read R.J. Rushdoony, if you haven't listened to Doug Wilson, if you haven't read some of the scholarship out there, you would think we're crazy. But the receipts are there. This is a long-term con, friends, and that's why I feel the sense of urgency. Like, you don't understand what's happening. It's not just about fascism. It is Christian fascism, and gutting these social safety nets is part of the plan.
Well, and there's so many levels of nuance to it, because for as much as they demonize Islam, the closest group ideologically to the Taliban in the United States is Christian nationalists. Very,
100%.
it's exactly the same. It's got a different logo. Um, but what people don't understand is not only has this been intentional, but for instance, gutting, they want to be able to gut all of these services so that they can privatize and profit off them, but also so that they can control who has access. It's about controlling who can get into a school and get educated. It was Ronald Reagan's manager who said, we are at risk of developing an educated proletariat. We cannot allow for everyone to go to school. It's so intentional. And it's also a way to reinstitute segregation, because the moral majority and the Jerry Falwells and all those people did not give a shit about abortion or any of those other issues until they lost the battle of segregation. And really until Jimmy Carter came to specifically Bob Jones and said, you're either going to stop discriminating against Black students or I'm going to take away your tax exemption.
That's right.
That's why I hate Jimmy Carter so much.
That's right.
All of this is about reinstituting Jim Crow, segregation, and their own version of theocracy, where the only person who is given equal opportunity and advantage is Christian white men. Like, that is the goal, because that is what they believe the world should look like. And they've been trying to do it since the 1930s when the family was founded. And the family, if you're not familiar with that organization, I would recommend reading the book, The Family by Jeff Charlotte. But when Abraham Vereday started that in the 1930s, it was all about, back to what I said, of this kind of trickle-down theology where he believed that the rich were chosen by God, the poor were getting punished by God, and they should just accept their comeuppance. He hated unions. The family was largely a union buster, because they didn't believe that workers had the right to protest for things like, I don't know, safety.
Crazy.
That these he called them key men, these chosen men should get to be able to treat you however they want, because that's God's will. Like, that's where these ideologies come from. And then you mix in Jim Crow and you mix in racism and misogyny, and obviously the long history of the church around women's rights and the treatment of women. It's a recipe for disaster, but it's absolutely what they want to do. They do not want to have free healthcare. They want to profit off it, so that only because the wealthy are always going to be able to see the doctor. They're going to always be able to get abortions. Nobody else can. They don't want a situation where a poor kid can get a good education. They want you to have a remedial education, right? You need to be able to read. You need to be able to do basic math. They don't want you going to college and getting yourself out. They don't want that. They want a cog in the machine. It's so, when you don't grow up in these systems, it does seem so conspiratorial.
I know.
But I will say that with the recent, the pastors that are online, Joel Webbin, is that his name?
Joel Webbin.
And then from Doug Wilson, I think people are finally starting to understand, with this movement of repeal the 19th within Christian nationalism, I think people are starting to finally see what this movement really is. And I'm like, no, I am telling you, this was never about abortion. They capitalized on your faith because you thought you were doing the right thing to control people, because they want to remove women's rights.
100%.
It has always been about control. Because again, their actions would be very different if it was really about being pro-life. It would also be pro everyone's life, including the mothers. And so I do think that people are starting to see it, because I know when Roe was overturned, and even last year, there was a few key issues like the Chevron decision that I talked to people about. And they were like, oh, that's crazy. You're just a fearmonger. You're blah, blah, blah. And wouldn't you know, those people have come back and said, holy shit. And I'm like, I know. And I know how crazy it sounds. I'm still going to blow the whistle.
Right.
But we're coming up on 100 years of Abraham Vereday trying to do everything he could to keep poor people poor and rich people richer and more powerful, and say that that's what God wants, which again, it's so ironic, because it's such an antithesis to what Christ taught, the Christ who said to the rich man, sell everything you own and give it to the poor. It becomes very clearly a facade. And I do want to say for your listeners, especially, because I try to be very careful about talking about my faith online. And the reason I do that is because I know that people who grow up in fundamentalism, especially, they have been so used to being told everything. This is what you believe. This is what you do. This is how you talk. This is how you dress. They've never had an opportunity to wrestle with their own faith and develop their own faith and ask their own questions. So the reason I don't deep dive into my faith very often, I do sometimes, but not very often, is because I want people to find their own way.
Yeah.
Can you sit with the question? You don't have to agree with me. It's great if you don't agree with me. We can have discourse around that. But can you sit with the question, and can you start to trust your own intuition?
Right.
And so what I want to make clear, like to your listeners, is that when I say Christian nationalism, I'm drawing a distinct line between the person of Jesus, who I think is one of the most amazing humans that ever lived, and whose teachings could, and have changed the world if people would actually follow them. But I don't consider the Christian movement in the church and in Christian nationalism in America to be any way associated with Christ other than name. So for those of you that are listening that are actual Christ followers, like, honor your tradition. I'm honoring you. It's just these people who have hijacked it and made it a religion of cruelty for the wealthy.
100%. Well, Monte, it's always a pleasure talking to you. I mean, we can go for hours, and I appreciate you coming on. I'm sure we'll talk at some point, either publicly or privately again. Probably tomorrow I'll text you with something new to whine about. If folks want to find where you are, plug all of your socials. Where can they find you?
So everything on all of the socials is Monte Mader, just my name, MonteMader. And I'm only posting on those channels. If you see my work pop up elsewhere, it's not me. We have a lot of AI issues going on right now. But I also have 2 podcasts. One is called Flipping Tables, and it's really about deconstruction, American history. I do a lot of interviews there. And I also have a unrelated podcast called Highway to Hell that is travel and true crime. And that is just my way to relax my brain. In the environment that we're in, but really just everywhere. I'm on Patreon, YouTube, Instagram, but it's just my name.
Awesome. Well, good talking to you, my friend, and thanks for making time. I really appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.